Hello, Runewraith here, and welcome to my comprehensive guide on the Gauntlet. If you enjoy these videos, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and be recommended to new people. So, what is the Gauntlet? Well, the Gauntlet is a solo minigame in Prifddinas, which the player is given a limited amount of time to explore a randomly generated dungeon layout, gather various resources and supplies by skilling and defeating crystalline monsters, and all of this is in preparation to defeat the crystalline Hunllef, the boss at the end of the dungeon. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the requirements that you're going to need before you're able to start doing Gauntlet runs successfully. The first and most obvious is probably the Song of the Elves quest. The Gauntlet resides in Prifddinas, and you need to complete this quest in order to gain access to that area of the map. In order to complete this quest, you're going to need 70 in Agility, Construction, Farming, Herblore, Hunter, Mining, Smithing, and Woodcutting. On top of this, in order to complete the prerequisites to the Song of the Elves quest, you should also have 60 range, 43 prayer, 50 thieving, 30 cooking, and at least 5 fletching. So those are the base requirements that you're going to need. However, since the Gauntlet is a combat-based minigame, you're going to need additional requirements that revolve around your combat skills. I would highly recommend at least 70 to 77 prayer for Piety, Rigor, and Augury. These offensive prayers will help you drastically as you're battling the crystalline Hunllef. I'd also recommend at a minimum to have 80 attack, defense, strength, hit points, range, and magic, since you will be using all of these in combination with each other while you are in the Gauntlet. This is going to help make your fights a lot smoother and more consistent for you as you gather your loot. So now that we know a little bit about the Gauntlet and its requirements, let's learn how to get there. Getting there is pretty simple, and there are really just 2 options for you. The first one is going to be a house teleport if your house is located in Prifddinas. That'll put you just south of the Gauntlet. And the other option is with the Crystal Teleport Seed or Eternal Crystal Teleport Seed. These are going to put you just southwest of the Gauntlet. So both very, very short runs to the portal, which resides in the northwest corner of Prifddinas. Once you actually enter the Gauntlet minigame, you'll be given 10 minutes to gather all of the potions, supplies, food, armor, and weapons that you need to defeat the crystalline Hunllef boss. You'll be presented with a lobby of sorts, and we'll just go ahead and call this area the home base. You're going to spawn here every time, and the Hunllef is always going to be to the north of you. In this room, in the northeastern corner, we have an exit, so if you need to exit the Gauntlet for any reason, this is where you'd go ahead and do that. In the northwestern corner of the room, you'll have your crystal bowl, and this will be used for crafting vials, armor, and weapons while you're within the Gauntlet. In the southeastern corner, you'll have the range, which is where you'll use to cook your paddlefish, which is the primary source of food within the Gauntlet. There's also a spout or spigot that you can use to fill up your vials while you're crafting your Egniol potions. Again, we'll go over these food and resources in just a second. Finally, in the center of this home base, you'll have a place where you can gather more tools, supplies, pestle and mortar, pickaxe, harpoon, stuff like that if you drop it and end up needing it again during your Gauntlet run. So now I'd like to present just a general overview of how we plan on tackling the Gauntlet today. The first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to go out on initial venture to gather some supplies, and these are just going to be things that we're going to need in order to craft some armor and weapons later on. The next step is we're going to be crafting some vials, making some potions, and creating a weapon for the step 3. Step 3 will be killing some demi-bosses on the outskirts of the Gauntlet map. These contain valuable drops that we're going to need in order to upgrade our weapons and kill the crystalline Hunllef more effectively. And finally, we're going to return back to our home base, craft some armor and weapons before taking on the final boss. And that's just the basic 4-step plan that we're going to use every single time that we go into the Gauntlet. So now that we've discussed an overview, let's talk about the Gauntlet's map layout. The map layout is important to know because we want to know where we spawn, where the Gauntlet spawns, and most importantly, where the demi-bosses in the room are located, because we're going to need them later on while we're gathering their ingredients for upgrading our weapons. So the Gauntlet is basically a 7x7 square consisting of 49 individual rooms. We don't actually have to worry about more than half of these rooms. We're really only concerned with a few while we're gathering supplies and hunting down the demi-bosses. So the demi-bosses will always spawn in the outer ring of the Gauntlet. Specifically, they'll spawn in the 3 rooms in the middle portion of the outer ring, in both the east, south, west, and north areas. So if we're traversing the Gauntlet map and we don't find any demi-bosses in the east, it's likely that we will find those same demi-bosses in the south, north, or west-hand corners of the map. As far as the Hunllef goes, the Hunllef will always be directly in the center square in the Gauntlet, and your character and home base will start directly adjacent to the Hunllef. So now let's talk about some of the materials that we'll need to gather while we are crafting our armor and weapons. Before we get started with this, I'd just like to make a short mention that everything in the Gauntlet really works on a 3-tier system, where tier 3 is the best and tier 1 is the worst. So I found through my experience that tier 2 provides a great balance between defensive capabilities and the ability to keep you alive in a difficult scenario, and the cost associated with making that particular gear and weapon. So what we're going to be going for is a tier 2 armor set and a tier 3 weapons. So with that in mind, that gives you just a frame of reference for when I recommend the amount of material needed. That's what we're aiming towards. So with that out of the way, the first material that we want to gather is called friend root. You'll need a hatchet to chop it, and each friend root will give you 3 different roots. I would recommend gathering 7 for the tier 2 armor and 3 if you are experienced for the tier 1 armor. So the next item that we will want to keep an eye out for is called linum. And unlike the friend root, we actually don't need any tools to harvest this. So each linum node will give 3 linum, and we will need 3 linum, so 1 node for the tier 1 armor, and 3 nodes or 7 linum in total for the tier 2 armor. The next item that we'll want to keep an eye out for is the ore deposits, and this is used in the crafting of armor. And we will need 7 for the tier 2 armor, we'll need 3 for the tier 1 armor, just like linum and friend, and we'll need a pickaxe to be able to mine these ore. So the next item is actually going to be used in the creation of Egnial potions, the only potions that we will actually be able to make within the Gauntlet. And these potions actually will give us both prayer points and stamina, so you could think of them as a combination of a prayer potion and a stamina potion together. And Grimleaf are the secondary ingredient in these potions, so we'll need 2 to 3 of them depending on our prayer potion or our prayer needs and our prayer level. Generally 2 should be able to get you through the Gauntlet just fine, but I usually will make a 3rd Egnial potion, so you'll need 3 Grimleaves in total, just to be on the safe side while you're starting out. So the next item we'll be wanting to look out for are these fishing nodes. And each fishing node will give 4 paddlefish when fished. So this is going to be your primary source of food while you're in the Gauntlet, so you'll definitely want to find a lot of these, and we're going to want around 18 to 20. Basically, you're going to want to fill up your inventory with paddlefish outside of your weapons and Egnial potions. Everything else should be paddlefish, so 18 to 20 should be more than enough to get you through the Gauntlet, even while you're learning. The next item we'll want to keep an eye out for are actually weapon frames. We'll only need 2 of these. Because these are actually used in creating the base weapon, so the tier 1 weapon, or the lowest tier of weapon that we can create, and we'll need at least 2 weapons to kill the Hunllef, because the Hunllef does use protection prayers. We'll get to that later on in the video, but we'll definitely want 2 of these weapon frames to create these weapons, so that we're able to switch our weapons and attack the Hunllef off prayer. So the final ingredient that we're going to want to keep an eye out for, and this isn't something you have to actively collect, are crystal shards. So these will be gained from mining different resources, chopping down the friend root, picking the linum, gathering fish, killing monsters. So you'll get them from a wide variety of sources. We'll need around 350 of these crystal shards per gauntlet run. And I know this sounds like a lot, but generally, these are given like very gratuitously. They're all over the place. So this is just something that we'll want to be consistently picking up because we'll use them not only in the creation of our Egnial potions, the crafting of our armor, but also the crafting of our weapons as well. So they're used in just about everything within the gauntlet. So that's all as far as gathering supplies goes in the gauntlet. So now let's talk about some of the enemies you'll be facing leading up to the crystalline Hunllef. Just like everything else in the gauntlet, the enemies work in a three-tier system, with tier 1 enemies being the worst and tier 3 enemies being the strongest, and those being the demi-bosses. So the tier 1 enemies you'll find are the crystalline rats, crystalline spiders, and crystalline bats. They will only attack you using melee, and really you should only be killing these things during your initial gathering of supplies. They'll oftentimes drop crystal shards, occasionally drop crystal teleport seeds and grimleafs, sometimes paddlefish, but the real reason you're after these things are for their weapon frame drop. It is unknown the current drop rate of the weapon frame. It is very common, and you are guaranteed to get a weapon frame after killing your third weak enemy here. The next tier of enemies that you'll be facing are the tier 2 enemies, and they are the crystalline wolf, the crystalline unicorn, and the crystalline scorpion. Just like the tier 1 enemies, they will also attack you only using melee, so you can pray against it accordingly. And these will drop a ton of shards in the ranges of 70 to 100 plus shards. So killing these things is a great way to gather a few extra shards if you need them or you find that you're running short. You are guaranteed a weapon frame on the first kill. However, these guys are a little bit stronger, and when you just start out in the gauntlet, your staff isn't very strong, so it's generally recommended to kill the tier 1 enemies to get that weapon frame rather than going directly for a tier 2 weapon to get the weapon frame. Now, of course, if there are only tier 2 enemies around, then by all means go for one, kill them. It's just going to end up being generally slower until you've crafted your first weapon. Finally, we get to the tier 3 enemies, and these are also known as the demi-bosses. Recall that these will only spawn in that outer ring of the gauntlet in those specific middle tiles. The first one that you might encounter is the dragon. It will attack using magic, so you can pray against it accordingly. That will be the only attack style that it uses, and it is guaranteed to drop the crystal orb. This is used to upgrade from a tier 2 staff to a tier 3 staff. The next enemy that you might fight is the crystalline bear. He will attack only using melee, and he actually can be safe spotted relatively easily. So feel free to attack him with a ranged weapon using a safe spot, and he is guaranteed to drop the crystalline spike. This is used to upgrade that crystalline halberd from tier 2 to tier 3. And the final demi-boss or tier 3 enemy that you'll encounter in the gauntlet is the crystalline dark beast. He will attack solely using ranged, and he is guaranteed to drop, along with crystal shards, the crystalline bowstring. And as you might have guessed, this is used to upgrade from a tier 2 crystalline bow to a tier 3 crystalline bow. So one thing to note about these demi-bosses that is really important to remember is that if you encounter 2 dark beasts, don't ignore it just because you've already got the crystalline bow. Because although the first of each type of these demi-bosses that you kill are guaranteed to drop the upgrade equipment piece for their respective combat style, that being magic, ranged, and melee, the second time you kill the same demi-boss, it is guaranteed to drop one of the other 2 items from one of the other 2 combat styles. So let's put that into an example. Say I encounter 2 dragons within 2 of the chambers in the gauntlet. After killing the first one, it is guaranteed to drop that crystal orb to upgrade my staff, but upon killing the second dragon, it also has a chance to drop either the crystalline spike to upgrade a melee weapon or the crystalline bowstring to upgrade a ranged weapon. So again, don't be afraid to kill 2 of the same demi-boss just because you already have one of the items, because it definitely will drop one of the other 2 for you as well. So now let's talk about our general strategy that we should be employing when we go through our first run in the gauntlet to gather some initial supplies. Basically, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making a backwards C with the rooms. And the reason why we do it this way is so that we can start and we can gather resources from 5 different rooms and then end up back in our home base so that we can craft and use the supplies that we've gathered, or drop them by their respective stations so that we can go out on our second run and pick up more supplies. So what does this look like? Well, first we're going to be starting out in the northernmost room. So go clear out that room, turn east or turn to the right, and then clear out that next room. From there, you're going to go south and clear out the next 2 rooms down below you, then west or to the left 1 room, clear out that room, and then move back into your home base. Now, needless to say, if you've gathered all of the supplies from this first run, and I'm talking about 3 linum, 3 to 7 linum, 3 to 7 ore, and 3 to 7 friend bark, as well as a weapon frame and some crystal shards, if you have all of those things from this first run, then you should absolutely, cut it short and go back to your home base. However, generally speaking, you won't get all of these things in a single run. So you should be able to leverage all 5 of these rooms in the backwards C notation in order to get all of those supplies. That is what I found is generally the most efficient way to go through our initial run and gather the supplies that we need for the gauntlet. So you can see in this run, I'm immediately clearing out this north room. And I've got a whole bunch of linum in here. So I'm going to go through and grab 3 linums. I'm just going for tier 1 armor in this particular run, but I'm immediately going to go to that eastern room. Now, unfortunately, I've got more linums here, which really doesn't do me much good. So I continue on to the next room. From here, I'm working my way down south, and you can see I'm staying parallel, or rather perpendicular to the home base at all times during this run. So here, I'm just grabbing some food. It's always a good idea to grab as many paddlefish as you can. They're definitely gonna help you out later on, and we move on to our next room to the south. This will be our southernmost room, and here the only thing of value to me is Grimroot. I kind of got a bad spawn here in terms of the resources because it's all just linum. Ideally, I would have liked to see some friend bark and ore as well. And finally, here I stumble upon some ore, so I'll grab that as well. And what I'm really looking for here is the weapon frame. I don't want to come to my home base without a weapon frame, so I'm really hoping that I can get one off of killing this minion. I'm guaranteed one on the 3rd kill. However, for this particular one, I only got shards. So that's okay. Right now, we've pretty much maxed out our inventory. So we come back to the home base and then we end up just cooking our food and then dropping it in front of this. And the reason why we do this is so that we can clear up some inventory space, because we're gonna need room for potions, vials, and in crafting more of our armor and weapons. And this is a nice segue into the next section where we will be talking about crafting. So by the end of our initial gathering run, the 2 things that we really want to have are 1, a weapon frame, and 2, enough crystal shards to create our first weapon. Everything else is secondary to us at this point. So how does crafting work? Well, crafting will all take place at that crystal singing bowl in the home base. So go up to that, select it, and you'll see all of the options that you have to craft with. There are 3 basic weapons that you can craft with. Again, everything in the gauntlet seems to work in tiers of 3. And those are the crystalline bow, the crystalline halberd, and the crystalline staff. I would recommend going for the crystalline staff just because it has some seriously high DPS even at lower levels. However, use your best discretion here. If your mage level is like 50 and your range level is 99, Of course, you're going to want to make the bow because you're going to be able to do way more DPS with that. So just use your best judgment on which item that you should create. However, create any of these 3 items with your weapon frame in crystal shards. When you craft the item for the first time, it is going to be tier 1, and that will require a weapon frame and crystal shards. I believe it's 30 crystal shards for the tier 1, and that's going to be across all of the different weapons. In order to upgrade that weapon to a tier 2 weapon, you just need 60 additional crystal shards, so 90 total for tier 1 and 2. And I would recommend at the end of your first gathering run that you should automatically craft the weapon and upgrade it to tier 2. This is going to give you some significant DPS advantages when you're going for both mid-tier monsters and demi-bosses. In order to upgrade any of these weapons to tier 3, you're gonna need the item that the demi-bosses drop. Be it the crystalline bowstring for the bow, the crystalline spike for the halberd coming from the bear, or the crystalline orb for the staff, which comes from the dragon. So that's really all there is to crafting. Some other things that you're gonna wanna know while you're crafting is you can craft vials, and this is what you're going to need to hold your Egnial potions. They each take 10 crystal shards to create the vials themselves, and then a secondary ingredient to those Egnial potions are crystal shards that you grind up into dust using a pestle and mortar. You'll see an example of this when we go through the full Gauntlet run through, so don't worry about this too much. I'll explain that in more detail later on. And then as far as the crafting goes for the armor themselves, you'll need either 3 or 7 of each ingredient. That's the friend bark, that's the linum, and that is the crystal ore. So you're gonna need 3 of each if you're building the tier 1 armor, and 7 of each if you're building the tier 2 armor, along with a certain amount of crystal shards. So you combine both of those things together and build your armor pieces at that crystal singing bowl as well. It's really not a complicated process. You'll get it down within your first or second Gauntlet run to get a feel for it, and then you'll build up a lot of speed and muscle memory when it comes to crafting all of these ingredients very quickly. So just to recap, after the end of that first initial scavenge through the Gauntlet, that first backwards C rotation, you're going to want to come back to the crystal singing bowl, and you're going to want to make a tier 1 weapon using your weapon frame and some crystal shards, and immediately upgrade that weapon to tier 2 at the crystal singing bowl. So at this point, you should have a tier 2 weapon, and you should also take this time, if you do have additional shards, to make either 2 or 3 vials. This way, when you go out on your second scavenging expedition, you'll have somewhere to fill up with water, and if you come across any Grimleaf, then you can add them directly to those vials to make your Egnial potions on your way. This is one of the tips that I can give immediately to start saving time on your Gauntlet runs and doing them quicker. So on your second run out, your primary focus is going to be killing 2 demi-bosses for 2 tier 3 weapons and gathering any supplies that you didn't get on your initial run. You're always going to be going in the direction that's opposite of the crystalline Hunllef. In this case, this is going to be east. You're going to want to immediately clear out those 3 tiles where the 3 rooms rather, where the actual demi-bosses will spawn. So if you found them, that's great. Kill them, take their loot, and then return back to base. If you didn't find them or got unlucky with this particular Gauntlet spawn, then you can always go through the outer perimeter and go to either the north or south sides where there's a chance for the other demi-bosses to spawn and kill them over there. Generally, you'll find them all in the first 3 places that you look, but if you get unlucky, you might have to go to the north or south section as well to look for demi-bosses out there. I've never had to go to the west section, and you can pretty much ignore all the tiles over there. One last tip that I want to give you is you should be using your crystal teleport seed to teleport back to your home base at this point, since we're not going to be doing any other runs, and we're just going to be cooking our food and crafting the rest of our components once we have it all. So don't be afraid to go super far from your home base while you're looking for food or loot or whatever it is that you need, because you'll just be using that crystal teleport seed to teleport right back. So on this particular supply run, I am just missing 2 Grimleafs for my other Egnial potions, a weapon frame for my other weapon that I need to craft, and then the drops that are going to be dropped by the actual Demi-bosses themselves. So here I've gotten lucky and I've actually found the crystalline dark beast, and so I'm just praying range and killing him as quickly as I can with my tier 2 magical staff. You can see that he's dropped a weapon frame, a bowstring, and some crystal shards for me, so I take all 3. Now the only thing that I really need is 1 more Grimroot and the other another drop from a Demi-boss. So I found my Grimroot over here and I'm good to go, and I'm just kind of working my way around the northern perimeter of the Gauntlet so that I can find that other Demi-boss. In the meantime, I'm picking up as much food as I can carry because I've got plenty of inventory spaces left by, so anytime that I see a fishing spot, I'll be sure to stop and collect some resources there. So here I found the bear, so I've started attacking him, and you can see how easily that bear is actually safe spotted. However, I have decided here to check the other 2 rooms on the side because I would rather have 2 ranged weapons. It'll make the fight a little bit easier with the Hunllef, and I happen to find the dragon. So that dragon is more desirable to me because he is going to drop the crystal orb, and I already have a tier 2 crystal staff. So this will save me some crystal shards as well, because otherwise I'd have to go through and craft a crystal halberd from scratch, whereas I already have a tier 2 crystal weapon here, so might as well kill the Demi-boss that drops the component that I need, right? So this is just the kind of simple logic that we should apply when we're doing runs in the Gauntlet, and stuff that you're going to build up with time and practice. So in our part 2 crafting series, we're going to pick up all of our resources that we gathered during our initial run. We are going to go to the crystal singing bowl, and we're going to craft all of our armor pieces. We're also going to upgrade our weapons to tier 3 and craft the second tier 3 weapon. So at this point, we should have all of our Egnial potions that we need, 2 tier 3 weapons, and a helm, chest plate, and chest legs or legs that we'll need for the Hunllef fight. So I'm dropping everything else. I don't need the crystal scepter anymore. I'm not opening up any more doors. I don't need any of my tools or my pestle and mortar. I just need my Egnial, food, and second tier 3 weapon, as well as the armor that I'm equipped with. After that, I'm going to cook the remainder of my food, pick up the rest of my paddlefish, and I am ready to officially take on the crystalline Hunllef. So now it's the moment we've all been waiting for. We're going to dissect the fight with the crystalline Hunllef to find out its weaknesses and how we can beat it consistently. So walking into the fight, the crystalline Hunllef has 2 different attack styles that he will use against you. The first one is magic, and the second one is range. His magic attack style actually has 2 different parts to it. The first part is a normal magic attack. This takes the form of kind of like a blue orb. This will hit through prayer. However, prayer will drastically reduce the damage you take. His second form of magic is more like a dragon ball or like a ball of fire. And this has a special effect that not only will it hit you as a normal magic attack would, but it will also disable your prayers. So you have to be very cognizant of when this attack occurs, and you need to be able to get your prayers back up as quickly as you can. He will throw this attack in every once in a while. It might happen in magic rotation, it might not. So just keep an eye out. It will never happen during a range attack. It'll only happen during his magic phase of the fight. Thirdly, the Hunllef does have a standard basic range attack that will also hit through prayer. Prayer will drastically reduce the damage you take from this, and it really just takes the form of what looks like some small crystals flying at you. Aside from that, the Hunllef does have a couple of special attacks that he will use throughout the fight that can make things a little bit difficult for you. The first one is he will rise up on his hind legs and smash his feet into the floor, summoning some tornadoes. Now, these tornadoes are especially dangerous because they're actually heat-seeking and they will home onto you. And they can do some serious damage when they start to stack on top of you. And they can even stack you out very, very quickly, especially in the corrupted Gauntlet. So what can we do to avoid these tornadoes? Well, we want to be moving the entire time that these tornadoes are active. We want to focus more on movement and avoiding them rather than doing DPS to the Hunllef himself. Now, getting into the Hunllef's actual fight, he will have three different phases in his fight, depending on how much HP he has remaining. So this first phase, he will only summon 1 tornado. His second phase, he'll summon 2 tornadoes. In his third phase, he will summon 3 tornadoes to come and hunt you down. So be cognizant of them and try to avoid them to the best of your ability. Now, the next special attack that the Hunllef has, and this goes on for the entire fight, is the colored floor tiles. So you'll notice the floor tiles will alternate between like a blue and a orangish color. When the floor tiles are blue, you want to move off of them because as soon as they turn orange, they will start dealing some massive damage to you every single tick. And this in combination with the tornadoes can easily stack you out, especially if you're not praying right or not paying attention to the Hunllef's rotation. So make sure that you're avoiding these floor tiles, progressing through the phases. The floor tiles will start with simple patterns, which are easy to navigate around, progressing into intermediate patterns, which are slightly harder. And in the final phase, where there are 3 tornadoes after you, the Hunllef will summon more complex patterns like the ones that you see in this image. The reason why they're more difficult to navigate around is just because when the tornadoes come, it can make things a little bit tighter and you have to be a little bit more tick accurate to avoid both the tornadoes and stay out of the floor tile. So it's worth noting that the Hunllef also will jump up and smash his legs on the ground and do some damage to you if you walk under him. So I would highly recommend tagging him with the Runelight NPC indicator so that you know what his bounds are and you can stay away from him and avoid actually walking under him during the fight. So how does the fight actually look? Well, going into the actual room with the Hunllef, he will always start with a range attack. And he will do 4 range attacks, followed by 4 magic attacks, followed by 4 range attacks, and so on and so forth. When he smashes his hands on the ground and summons our tornadoes, that does count as one of the attacks in his cycle. So if he's done 3 range attacks and smashes his feet, then his next attack is going to be a magic attack. And it continues on like that for the entire fight. Now, as far as the Hunllef's prayer is concerned, he will pray against the combat style that you are using after every 6 attacks. So you want to make sure that you're constantly switching your weapon after every 6 attacks so that you're not attacking him while he is praying against you. He will deflect all of the damage that you attack him with if you are attacking him with the wrong weapon. So use this to your advantage to change both your prayers and attack him off prayer accordingly. So let's recap. All you have to do is go into the room, pray range, start attacking him, switch your weapon whenever he changes his prayer, avoid the tornadoes, don't walk under him, avoid the colored tiles, turn your prayers back on when he attacks you with his magical attack, and basically finish the fight as it gets more difficult when he summons more tornadoes and the tile patterns become more complex. All jokes aside, you definitely can do this. He does have a lot of attacks. It's going to take some getting used to. You may die a couple times while you're first figuring things out. It's okay. It's a learning experience. Don't give up on it. I promise it becomes more and more rewarding the more that you kill him. And he provides you with some really great opportunities to just practice your movement, practice your prayer switching, practice your weapon switching, keeping your health high and your prayer high and stuff like that. So it is a really, really fun fight to do once you get the hang of it. But that is the gist of the Hunllef fight. So if there are any tips and tricks that I can give you during the entirety of the gauntlet, the first one is don't unlock rooms while you're standing in the middle of the hallway. Well, why don't we do this? It's because we don't know what's on the other side of that room. So if you're gonna unlock a demi-boss room, there could be a dragon on the other side. So as soon as you unlock it while you're standing in the hallway, that dragon will immediately aggro to you and launch an attack that very same tick, meaning there's just no way you're gonna be able to get your protection prayers up in time, and you're gonna take 30 damage right to the face almost every time because you're wearing no armor. So how do you avoid this? Well, it's simple. You just have to light the nodes with your staff while you're not standing in the middle of the hallway. So just stand a little bit to the side and you'll have no problems with this whatsoever. The second tip is you can actually use your pestle and mortar to crush the ore, bowstring, or crystal spike into 80 crystal shards. This provides a really great way to, if you have killed an extra demi-boss for whatever reason and you're low on crystal shards, you can actually do that instead of having to kill another creature or grind for more crystal shards. I always recommend filling vials at fishing spots. This is really important because you can actually use the vials as a way of tick manipulating the fish to actually fish them faster. And this also supplements the need to go to the watering hole in your home base and fill up your vials over there, because you can do it while you're fishing, and that saves some precious seconds while you're going through your gauntlet run. The next tip I have for you is that tier 3 armor is almost never worth making. You might say, that's crazy, why wouldn't you want the best armor that you can make? And the reason why is because it is just insanely costly while you're gathering those supplies. I think it's something like you need 12 of each supply to create the tier 3 armor. And aside from maybe hardcore Iron Men who are very nervous about the gauntlet for the first time, or if you're going for some combat achievements which require you to make tier 3 armor, you should never be making tier 3 armor realistically. In fact, I've killed the gauntlet with no armor whatsoever, and I consistently do the corrupted gauntlet with tier 1 armor. So it is very much possible to get away with tier 1 or tier 2 armor. No need to do tier 3 armor. So at this point, I really don't have much else to say about the gauntlet. The rest of the video is really just going to be me going through it a full run end to end so that you can see where my head's at and what I'm thinking about while I'm going through the run. Feel free to try the gauntlet a couple times yourself and then come back to the video if you have any questions. So the first thing I'm doing here is just going out on my initial run gathering supplies, and specifically I'm looking for 2 things, that being the crystal shards and a weapon frame to make a tier 2 weapon. Any other resources that I can find I will definitely be gathering, such as wood, the friend bark, the linum, and the ore themselves, as well as any grim leaf that I can find. Unfortunately, in this run, I actually only stumble upon 1 tier 1 enemy, and we don't know the exact drop rate for a weapon frame from a tier 1 enemy, so it is possible that I could get it on the first kill. It is guaranteed on the 3rd kill. However, in this particular scenario, I did not get lucky, so I did not get that weapon frame. However, the gauntlet is all about adapting, and it's adapting to what layout you're given, what kind of enemies are there. If I need to make changes or deviations to the standard plan, that's okay, and you'll see in this video that I do. For now though, I'm gonna just cook all my food, drop it here, and then go to the crystal bowl so that I can make some vials. And so I'm already prepping for some Agnial potions that I'm going to be making on later on. I'll drop my extra supplies here. This will be needed later on when I go to craft my tier 1 armor, and I'll continue out in venturing into the area. So you'll see I'm actually heading out on the second rotation, which is in the right direction towards the demi-bosses. So I'm pre-scouting for any demi-bosses that I can find up here, even though I won't be killing them because I don't have a tier 2 weapon yet. So what I'm really looking for is a tier 2 enemy here. So these tier 2 enemies are great because they drop a ton of crystal shards, and because they are guaranteed on the first kill to drop a crystal or a weapon frame if you don't already have one. So now that I have my weapon frame, I'm going to be making my way all the way back to the home base to craft my tier 2 weapon. After crafting my tier 2 weapon, I'm ready to venture out further into the outlying area in the gauntlet to look for those demi-bosses. In the meantime, I've gone ahead and just crafted some crystal dust using the crystal shards and the pestle and mortar, and this will be the secondary ingredient to make those egg meal potions. I've already pre-filled the vials and everything, so the only other thing I need is Grimleaf. And I was lucky enough to find a crystal dark beast out here. So you can see I'm picking the Grimleaf in between my attacks, so that I'm continuing to gather in supplies. And one thing that I'm doing here is I'm moving over towards the area that I need to be in. So I know that I'm going to scout the room directly to the north here, to my right. And so I was trying to go over there to, sometimes you can lure monsters to where the next room is. And these are just going to be little time savers that'll help you more so in the corrupted gauntlet than the regular gauntlet, because there's more than enough time in the regular gauntlet. But here I'm just finding some of the extra Grim Leaf that I need and gathering some more food, because, you know, if I have more room to gather food, then why not? Might as well be better prepared for the Hunllef. So at this point, I've stumbled upon my second Demi-boss, and 2 Demi-bosses is really all you need. However, since I'm over here on the other side of the gauntlet, I might as well scout some of the other rooms. Now, I was lucky enough to find a dragon over here, and you can see I switched from attacking the bear to the dragon. The reason why I did this is because I already have a tier 2 magic staff. And there's really 2 reasons here. One, this is going to save me from having to craft a crystal halberd from scratch. This is going to save me crystal shards in the long run, and it gives me a second ranged weapon. So sometimes for beginners, using the crystal halberd can be a little bit trickier because you have to be 1 square away, just outside of melee distance, 2 squares away technically, to be able to attack the Hunllef. And this can put a little bit of extra pressure on you while you're fighting him. So might as well have 2 ranged weapons that can attack him from afar and worry about dodging the tornadoes and the tile patterns more so than doing damage with the halberd. So at this point, I've got all of my materials. I've gone ahead and crafted my tier 1 armor, and I've gone ahead and organized and decanted my potion and dropped anything in the inventory that I don't need. So I don't need my crystal scepter, and I don't need my crystal harpoon anymore, and I don't need my spare crystal shards anymore either. So I'm making as much room as I can for everything else, which is just food, potions, and my other weapon. At this point, I'm cooking the rest of my food. I'll pick up what's on the ground, and I will be all set to take on the Hunllef. So after entering into the room, I immediately pray range, because the Hunllef will always attack with range, and I'm also praying my rigor offensive prayer. This is super important. You always want to be praying offensive prayers during the gauntlet to maximize your DPS. Your 3 Egg potions will be more than enough to get you through this, so don't be afraid to waste those prayer points. So you can see after every 4 attacks, he switches to magic, and he's just changed back to range now. And I'm switching my prayers first, and then I'm switching my weapon second. So always make sure that those prayers are out before switching your weapons. So we summoned his first tornado, and the first thing I'm doing is moving around the room. You can see where my priorities are. The first one is making sure that I get my prayers back up after he disables them. The second one is avoiding that tornado and staying on the move. And then finally, if I have time in between that, then I can do some DPS and focus on attacking him. One thing we'll see later on in the fight that's really important to remember is if you have time to spare, it's always a good idea to let the Hunllef wander into one of the corners of the room. And you'll see why later on, but it really helps with avoiding the tornadoes and avoiding the tile patterns as they get more complex. So you can see here, we're in phase 2 of the fight. He spawned 2 tornadoes to attack me, but really we're just doing the same exact thing. We're avoiding those tornadoes, we're staying on the move, we're managing our prayers, and we're staying out of those tiles right there. So at this point, we've officially entered into phase 3 of the fight. You can see those tile patterns are definitely more complex, and they make it a lot more difficult to navigate around the room, especially when those tornadoes are chasing you. So you want to try to make sure that you're on top of these tile patterns and avoiding them. You can also see they change very, very quickly. Did you see how quickly that changed from that light blue color to the dark blue? It only gives you a couple of seconds to react. So make sure you're always trying to position yourself appropriately. And you can see right here, it's definitely a little bit cramped while those tornadoes are there. So this is by far the most challenging part of the fight. But once you get it down and once you really get that movement down, it's going to be a piece of cake for you. And again, waiting for the Hunllef to be in one of the corners will give you significantly more room to move around during this phase of the fight, especially while those tornadoes are after you. So at this point, we're just finishing off with everything that we put into practice, and we just got ourselves an easy Hunllef kill in under 10 minutes. So we're going to check the rewards chest now, and we get a solid almost 100k in loot for just 10 minutes of work. So really, that's all that I had to share with everyone today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. It helps me produce more content and reach new people. Have a great day.